My brother stole my baby's name. I had to change it in secret. Before everything unfolded, before the silent storm of family drama and hushed decisions, I was in a state of blissful anticipation. My wife and I were expecting our first child, a son. From the very early stages of her pregnancy, we had chosen a name. It was a name that carried weight and meaning, something we had whispered to each other in the quiet moments of daydreaming about our future. It was our secret, a small piece of the world we were creating for our child. We had decided to keep it to ourselves, savor the joy of it privately until the day we introduced him to the world. My brother and his wife were also expecting. Their son was due a few months before ours. It was a time that should have been filled with shared excitement and the promise of cousinly adventures. Instead, it became the backdrop for an unexpected betrayal. My sister-in-law, with her ever-curious nature, had somehow discovered the name we had chosen. How she did it, we could only speculate. Perhaps she overheard a conversation or stumbled upon a note left unattended. She never explained, simply congratulated us on our choice with a bright, insincere smile and a vague comment about how much she loved it. I remember mentioning the incident to my brother in a casual, almost offhanded way. I expected a laugh, maybe a shared roll of the eyes at his wife's tendency to snoop. Instead, he shrugged it off, saying, "Yeah, she likes to browse through people's things." As if this was just another quirky habit, like collecting stamps or having a penchant for exotic teas. I felt a knot form in my stomach, the first sign that something wasn't right. When their son was born a few months later, I was genuinely happy for them. The joy of a new life entering the family momentarily overshadowed my growing unease. But then, they announced his name. The exact name we had chosen, first, middle, and last. It was like watching a slow-motion train wreck from which I couldn't look away. My heart sank, the joy of the moment shattered by an overwhelming sense of disbelief and betrayal. The phone call from my brother came soon after. His voice carried the weight of someone who knew they were delivering bad news, but hoped to soften the blow. He told me to keep quiet about it. His wife had had a difficult birth, and she didn't need any more drama. He knew we might not like it, but she was adamant about the name. Her reasoning was bizarrely sentimental. She wanted our sons to share a name, to have an unbreakable bond like the one my brother and I shared with our own matching, twin-like names. I was stunned. How could he not see the absurdity of it all? The complications this would cause, the confusion, the constant need to explain or differentiate. We'd gone from anticipating the joy of announcing our son's name to grappling with the loss of something deeply personal. My wife and I spent many evenings talking it over, going back and forth between anger and disbelief. We considered confronting them, demanding they change the name. But what good would that do? Would we really want to engage in a tug-of-war over something that should have been celebrated with love? In the end, we decided on a different course of action. We would choose a new name for our son, but we would keep it to ourselves. We'd allow everyone to believe that we were sticking with the original name until there was no risk of my sister-in-law changing my nephew's name. In our state, making a change after 6 months was significantly more complicated, and we weren't willing to take any chances. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself walking a tightrope of secrecy and anticipation. Our close family members, those who understood the situation, were supportive. They saw the logic in our decision, the grace in avoiding a direct confrontation. Friends and in-laws nodded in understanding when we finally revealed the true name of our son. But my brother's reaction was less forgiving. He accused me of upsetting his wife, of taking away her choice to connect our boys in this strange, unwanted way. He called it a dick move, as if we'd stolen something from them. It was infuriating. I wanted to shake him, to make him see how absurd it was to expect us to simply accept this betrayal and move on. I tried to reason with him. I pointed out the practical issues, how much tougher it would be with both boys enrolled in the same schools, having the same name, the potential for mix-ups in banking, at doctors' offices, even something as simple as a birthday party invitation. But he brushed it off, insisting that plenty of people have the same name, and it's not a big deal. He accused us of trying to gatekeep a name, as though we were hoarding it like some precious family heirloom. My wife, ever the voice of reason, said he was only trying to appease his wife, to keep her from being mad. But it didn't make it any easier to swallow. We were left with the bitter taste of a family rift, a wound that might never fully heal. In the quiet moments, when the house is still and our son is asleep, I find myself reflecting on the whole ordeal. What should have been a joyous time became tainted by unnecessary drama and hurt feelings. We did what we thought was best for our son, for our family. We chose to take the high road, to avoid a confrontation that could have left deeper scars. As I watch my son sleep, his chest rising and falling in the soft glow of the nightlight, I feel a mixture of emotions: pride in our decision, sadness for the loss of what could have been, and a lingering question that haunts me. Was it worth it to stay silent, to change our son's name in secrecy, rather than fight for what was ours? In those quiet moments, when the house was still, and the only sound was the gentle rhythm of my son's breathing, the conflict continued to gnaw at my conscience. I tried to tell myself that we did the right thing, that we chose peace over chaos, but there was an undeniable sting of disappointment that I couldn't quite shake off. It was as if a shadow loomed over what should have been one of the happiest times of our lives. I couldn't help but replay every conversation, every encounter with my brother and his wife. There was a surreal quality to it all, like living in an alternate reality where common sense didn't apply. I wondered if my brother truly understood the position he had put us in, or if he was so blinded by his desire to placate his wife that he couldn't see beyond it. The thought that this could have been avoided if he had just stood up for us, for our right to name our son without interference, was a bitter pill to swallow. I found myself questioning the nature of familial bonds. What does it mean to be a brother? To support, to protect, to stand by each other through thick and thin. Yet, here we were, torn apart by something as seemingly trivial as a name. But it wasn't just a name. It was a symbol of our dreams, our hopes, the identity we had lovingly crafted for our son before he even came into this world. The fallout was palpable. Family gatherings were tinged with an undercurrent of tension, a silent acknowledgement of the elephant in the room. Conversations were stilted, punctuated by awkward pauses and forced smiles. I missed the easy camaraderie we once shared, the effortless laughter that now felt like a distant memory. Despite the support from my parents and sisters, there was a nagging feeling of isolation. It was as if we were living in a bubble, separated from the rest of the family by an invisible wall of unspoken resentment. My wife felt it too, though she tried to put on a brave face. She was my rock, my steadfast partner in this storm of emotions, but I could see the toll it was taking on her. At times, I caught myself wondering what life would have been like if we had chosen to confront my brother and sister-in-law head-on. Would it have been worth the inevitable fallout? Or would it have created an even wider chasm, one that might never be bridged? The hypothetical scenarios played out in my mind like scenes from a movie, each with its own set of consequences, none of them entirely satisfying. And then there was the matter of our son's future. Would he one day ask why his name was changed? Would he resent us for not fighting harder for what was rightfully his? These thoughts weighed heavily on me, a constant reminder of the complexity of parenthood and the responsibility we bear for the choices we make. In a bid to find some semblance of closure, I considered reaching out to my brother. Maybe a heart-to-heart conversation could mend the rift, or, at the very least, provide some clarity. But every time I picked up the phone, doubt crept in. What if it backfired? What if it stirred up more drama than it resolved? Ultimately, I realized that the path to healing would not be a straightforward one. It would take time, patience, and perhaps a willingness to forgive, not just my brother and sister-in-law, but also myself for the choices we made. There was no perfect solution, no magical resolution to make everything right again. But there was hope, the faint glimmer of possibility that one day we might find our way back to each other. For now, I took solace in the small moments of joy that punctuated our days. The way my son's eyes lit up when he saw me, the infectious sound of his laughter, the gentle weight of him asleep in my arms. These were the things that truly mattered, the memories that would last a lifetime, long after the sting of betrayal had faded into the background. And so, as the days turned into weeks and then months, I clung to the belief that time would heal our wounds, that the love we shared as a family would eventually outweigh the hurt and disappointment. It was a fragile hope, but it was enough to keep me moving forward, one day at a time. But even as I tried to focus on the small joys, The undercurrent of tension within the family persisted, like a subtle vibration that you feel more than you hear. Each family gathering seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the moment when the facade of normalcy would crack. My brother and I danced around each other, exchanging pleasantries that felt rehearsed and hollow. Our conversations were reduced to surface-level topics, carefully avoiding the subject that loomed largest between us. There was a part of me that longed for the days when we were close, when our bond seemed unbreakable. We'd grown up side by side, sharing secrets and dreams, each other's confidants in a world that could sometimes feel overwhelming. Losing that connection felt like losing a part of myself, and it left me with a sense of mourning for something intangible yet deeply cherished. I wondered if he ever felt the same, if there was a part of him that regretted the choices that brought us to this point. Did he ever look at his son and think about the name, about the chain of events that had unfolded because of it? Or was he so entrenched in his position, so determined to shield his wife from any discomfort, that he couldn't allow himself to see the full picture? The silence between us was deafening, filled with words unspoken and emotions unexpressed. I wanted to bridge the gap, to reach out and reconcile, but the fear of rejection held me back. What if he dismissed my attempts? What if he didn't care enough to mend what was broken? One evening, as I sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, my wife joined me. Her presence was a comfort, a reminder that I wasn't alone in this. She took my hand in hers, and we sat in companionable silence, the cool breeze whispering through the trees. "You know," she said softly, breaking the quiet, "we're doing the best we can. For our son, for us. That's what matters." I nodded, grateful for her unwavering support. "I just wish it didn't have to be this way." "Maybe it doesn't," she suggested gently. "Maybe there's still a chance to fix things." Her words lingered in the air, a beacon of hope in the midst of uncertainty. It was a possibility I had considered, but it seemed fraught with risk. Yet, as I sat there with her, I realized that perhaps the fear of what might go wrong had kept me from seeing what could go right. A few days later, with a determination I hadn't felt in some time, I decided to reach out to my brother. I crafted a message, trying to find the right balance between honesty and diplomacy, between vulnerability and strength. I wanted to convey how much I missed him, how much I wanted to move past this, but without igniting another firestorm of emotions. When I finally hit send, it felt like releasing a breath I'd been holding for months. The waiting was excruciating, each passing hour a reminder of the uncertainty that lay ahead. But there was also a sense of relief, a feeling that I had taken a step, however small, toward healing. To my surprise, his response came sooner than I expected. It was brief, a simple acknowledgement of my message, and a suggestion to meet up and talk. It wasn't the effusive reconciliation I might have hoped for, but it was a start. A tentative olive branch extended across the chasm that had formed between us. In the days that followed, I found myself cautiously optimistic, envisioning how the conversation might unfold. I imagined us sitting down together, perhaps over a cup of coffee, and finally addressing the elephant in the room. There was no guarantee that it would resolve everything, but it was a chance to be heard, to express feelings that had been bottled up for too long. As the day of our meeting approached, I felt a mix of anticipation and anxiety. It was like standing on the edge of a precipice, knowing that one misstep could lead to a fall, but also that taking the leap could bring us back to solid ground. I hoped that he would come with an open heart, ready to listen and to share, just as I was. Whatever the outcome, I knew that this was a step I needed to take, not just for myself, but for my family. It was an opportunity to rewrite the narrative, to choose understanding over resentment, connection over division. And as I prepared for what lay ahead, I held on to the belief that, in the end, love would find a way to guide us back to each other. The day of our meeting arrived, and I found myself standing in front of the mirror, adjusting my shirt for what must have been the 10th time. It was odd how preparing for a conversation could feel as nerve-wracking as a job interview or a first date. My mind raced with possible scenarios, each one filled with varying degrees of confrontation and reconciliation. I took a deep breath, trying to quiet the storm of thoughts swirling in my head. This was not about winning or losing. It was about finding a way forward. The cafe we chose was a quiet little spot, tucked away from the bustling main street. It was a place where we used to meet often before our lives became so tangled with misunderstandings and unspoken grievances. As I walked in, the familiar aroma of freshly brewed coffee hit me, stirring memories of simpler times. I spotted my brother sitting by the window, his gaze focused on the world outside, as if searching for answers in the passing people. I approached the table and, as he turned to meet my eyes, there was a flicker of something, recognition perhaps, or a shared history that neither of us could deny. We exchanged a tentative smile, the kind that felt like an unspoken promise to keep things civil, to try and bridge the gap that had grown between us. "Hey," I said, sliding into the seat opposite him. "Hey," he replied, his voice carrying an edge of uncertainty. We ordered our drinks, and as we waited, the silence stretched between us. It wasn't the oppressive silence of before, but rather a cautious pause, as though each of us was choosing our words with care, weighing their potential to either heal or harm. "So," I began, breaking the quiet. "Thanks for meeting with me," he nodded, his fingers tracing the rim of his coffee cup. "I'm glad you reached out. It's been too long." There it was, the acknowledgement that things hadn't been right between us, a small concession that we were both aware of the distance that had crept into our relationship. It was a start. "I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened," I said, choosing my words carefully. "And I just wanted to say that, despite everything, I miss us. I miss the way things used to be." His eyes softened, and for a moment, I saw my brother as I remembered him, my childhood partner in crime, my confidant. "I miss that too," he admitted, his voice low. "I guess I didn't realize how much until it was gone." We sat in silence for a moment, letting the weight of our shared admissions settle between us. It felt like a crack in the wall we'd built, a small opening that let in a sliver of light. "I know the whole name thing got out of hand," I continued, trying to keep the conversation on track. I felt like we were blindsided. It felt personal, you know?" He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck in a gesture that spoke of his own discomfort. "I get that. And I'm sorry. I think I was just trying to keep the peace at home, but in the process, I didn't think about how it would affect you and your family." His apology was unexpected, a balm on the raw wound that had festered for too long. It was a reminder that, beneath the layers of hurt and misunderstanding, there was still a foundation of love and respect that could be rebuilt. "I appreciate that," I said, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. "I really do." We spent the next hour talking, really talking, about everything and nothing. It was as though once the dam had broken, there was a flood of words that needed to be said. We spoke about our kids, the challenges of parenthood, and the dreams we had for our families. It was a conversation that reminded me of why I had missed him so much. As we prepared to leave, there was a sense of tentative hope between us. We hadn't resolved everything, but we had taken the first step, and that was enough for now. As we parted ways, he pulled me into a hug, a gesture that spoke volumes more than words ever could. "Let's not wait so long next time," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Agreed," I replied, feeling the warmth of his embrace and the promise of better days to come. As I walked back to my car, the sun dipped low in the sky, casting a golden glow over everything. It felt like a metaphor for the journey we were on, one of finding light in the shadows, of seeking connection even when it seemed elusive. There was still work to be done, still conversations to be had, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were on the right path. And as I drove home, I realized that the weight I had been carrying for so long had lifted, replaced by a sense of peace and the hopeful anticipation of what the future might hold for us both. Later that evening, as I sat in our living room, the house seemed quieter than usual. My wife was in the nursery, softly singing our son to sleep. Her voice, a gentle lullaby, floated through the air, wrapping the room in warmth. I leaned back against the couch, closing my eyes for a moment, allowing myself to absorb the tranquility of the moment. The conversation with my brother replayed in my mind, each word resonating with newfound clarity. It was strange how a single meeting, a simple exchange of words, could shift the landscape of our relationship so profoundly. It felt like a long-awaited exhale, the release of emotions tightly wound and held back for far too long. I thought about the moments leading up to our decision to change our son's name, The countless discussions, the sleepless nights, the gnawing anxiety of whether we had done the right thing. The name we had chosen had meant something to us, a symbol of new beginnings and hope. To have it taken, appropriated without warning, felt like a betrayal of the deepest kind. Yet here we were, slowly stitching the fabric of our family back together, thread by careful thread. My thoughts drifted to my sister-in-law, and I wondered how she was coping with the aftermath of our decision. I hoped she could come to understand our perspective, to see that our actions weren't meant to hurt or alienate, but to reclaim something that was ours. Perhaps in time, she too would come to realize that. The door creaked softly as my wife entered the room, her face glowing with the contentment that comes from watching a child sleep. She joined me on the couch, her hand finding mine, the simple touch grounding me in the present. "How did it go?" she asked, her eyes searching mine for any hint of the afternoon's outcome. "It went well, I think," I replied, squeezing her hand. "We talked, really talked, and it felt like we were finally on the same page." She smiled, her relief mirroring my own. "I'm glad. It's been too long since you two were at odds." "Yeah," I said, nodding slowly. "It feels good to finally let go of all that tension." We sat together in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from years of shared experiences and mutual understanding. It was these moments, these quiet interludes, that reminded me of why we had fought so hard to protect our family's peace. As the evening unfolded, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought us here. It was a path marked by unexpected twists and turns, by decisions made in the heat of the moment, and by the unwavering support of those I loved. In the end, what mattered most was not the names we gave our children or the misunderstandings that arose, but the bonds that held us together through it all. I glanced at my wife, her eyes soft with love and encouragement, and felt a swell of gratitude for the life we were building together. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and that was enough. Later, as I lay in bed, the house quiet around me, a question lingered in my mind. It was a question that had haunted me from the start, one that had driven my actions and shaped my choices. As I drifted off to sleep, the question hung in the air, waiting for an answer. Was it wrong to protect what was rightfully ours?